All right, we are here with Annie DeAngelo.
Greetings.
What do you do, Annie?
Oh, I like to ski. I like to mountain bike. I like to hunt. I like to go on the river. I like to eat.
Big outdoorsy.
Big outdoorsy.
Yeah, big outdoorsy.
Connoisseur of wild game cooking, for sure.
Connoisseur of wild game cooking.
Mhm.
Yeah. Stay tuned for the 2027 release of the cookbook.
The cookbook.
Is that an actual goal, 2027?
I just pulled a number out of nowhere, but but someday, hopefully.
Sometimes it's good to have an end date so that way you actually work on it. So what do you do for work? Give everybody kind of like a line out of like who you are, what you do.
What do I do for work? That's a great question.
Start out with what you used to do.
I used to be a middle school classroom teacher, which Leah and Jordan last night pointed out is apparent given my lack of swearing.
Lack of grumpy snow.
Yeah.
No, not the lack
Presence.
of, the presence of grumpy stuff. Yeah. It was funny.
Could have been another word.
Yeah.
For sure. I was a middle school classroom teacher. Was in the classroom for basically a decade, which makes us feel really old.
Mm-hmm.
And then quit that. And I'd always been doing some outdoor ed as a course leader for Knowles, National Outdoor Leadership School.
You used to do that every summer that you taught. You would go and do a couple Knowles courses.
Yeah. Good memory.
Oh, yeah.
And then when I left teaching, coming up on 2 years ago, like a year and a half ago, decided I wanted to do a bunch of different things in the outdoor world. And so I've been wearing a bunch of different hats, but in the winter, the main hat I'm wearing is Avalanche educator.
For the...
Again, many hats, right? I'm the education coordinator for the Friends of the Sawtooth Avalanche Center, and I'm a instructor for Sawtooth Mountain Guides.
Perfect.
Awesome. So that's what we're going to talk about today. We went to a place in White Dog Brewery here in Boise, and you gave an avalanche course. So that was like course 1, right? Is that what you guys call level 1?
Yeah. Or we call that like an introduction.
Got it.
Introduction to avalanches. And then there's sort of this kind of formal track you can enter that has a level 1, like a recreational level 1 3-day course. Then there's a 1-day rescue course. And you can actually take the rescue course before the level 1 or vice versa. And then if you want to keep going, you can take a level 2. And then if you really want to keep going and you think avalanches are going to be part of your work or you're just super into it, you can go into what's the professional level track and you can take a Pro 1 and a Pro 2.
Which would be what if you were like if you wanted to be a ski instructor or something, you would take all of those?
If you wanted to be, I think a lot of forecasters, obviously people that want to go towards forecasting take it, patrollers take it, a lot of guides take it. Avalanche educators take it. So
Yeah. Have you been in an avalanche?
I've never been in an avalanche.
No.
I hope I never am.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Fingers crossed.
I mean, if you're doing your job right and being prepared, hopefully you never have to be.
Yeah, it's this like funny thing, right? I spend literally almost every day of the winter teaching people about a thing that I haven't actually been in. You know what I mean? Like I talk about it. I think about avalanches for like the majority of my waking hours. So it's this kind of funny thing.
Do you guys ever do like a practice? Like you see ski patrol all the time, like throwing some sort of demolition device to kind of cause a small slide. Have you guys ever like put a backpack in that with a transceiver and like caused the slide and then like practiced going in and finding that?
I haven't, but they do set up like pretty big scale drills. Like there's actually one tonight in the Wood River Valley that I won't be at, but that's going to be like a big interagency. Like heli ski will be there, all the fire departments will be there, like different guide services will be there. So the practice ranges from like, hey, we're going to like take your avalanche transceiver, we're going to wrap it in plastic, put it in a bag, put it ideally beneath like something hard so that your bag doesn't get perforated, like a just square of plywood type thing, to like we're setting up a drill that's going to involve helicopters.
Yeah, I was just thinking that would give you more of like a randomized place that thing would end up as if it was actually involved in a true avalanche type of thing. Because I feel like that would be the hardest part is like where to start looking, which is why it's important to have a transceiver. But I'm sure we'll get into that.
Totally.
Yeah. So basically, like, that's why we wanted to have you on, is we want to talk about avalanches and like how it conflicts with hunters, or how hunters are involved in them. It was really hard to find any research on that.
Totally.
Like, it was hard to find the numbers. They list it as like skiers, snowboarders,
Snowmobilers,
snowmobilers, and then other.
Mm-hmm.
And there wasn't a lot of other, I noticed last night, but yeah, it has to happen.
I actually think, and this is an unresearched, but this is like a think, and I've talked about some other professionals with it, of like, I think that hunters might be the group of people, and if they aren't the top group, they're among the top groups of people that are in avalanche terrain, in snow, without equipment.
Yeah,
for
right? You think of
sure.
like numbers of, say, the user days of people being in an environment, and I bet hunters either top or among the top groups that are out in that, exposed to that hazard without equipment.
Yeah, they probably don't think about it.
Totally.
I would say 90% of people aren't going to think about it unless they are also skiers, backcountry skiers, or snowmobilers, and that it's kind of like a part of their like repertoire already. But if you don't recreate in the snow very often, and you just happen to draw a sheep tag or a goat tag or something, you find yourself up in these areas. I don't think you're going to think about bringing anything with you, or having your friends bring anything with them. So
Totally. No, I mean, I'll be the first to admit, like, I grew up having no idea about anything about avalanches. Like, I thought they were these like random things that happen on Mount Everest. You know, like, I had no idea that it could happen in a place that I was going sledding with friends, you know, and they can happen in pretty innocuous looking places.
The podcast is brought to you in part by First Light Technical Clothing, keeping me dry and comfortable from the duck blind to the backcountry. Check out all of their offerings at firstlight.com. Sig Sauer, from the popular cross rifle, which I love, to everything optics, handguns, ammunition, and accessories. Visit sigsauer.com for their full lineup. And Onyx Hunt Maps. I use Onyx Maps to plan and execute my own hunts, plus keep everything organized and accounted for at the outfit. I'm always scouting with the app. Check them out at onyxhunt.com.
And just nature of hunting, and like, especially Western hunting, like, the places you are the places where avalanches happen. Last year, we actually had, in the Wood River Valley, we had 2 historic avalanche cycles. And in one of them, you could actually see that this massive avalanche was triggered by some elk, because you could actually see the elk tracks going across a slope, and then you could see where the slide was. Elk tracks not coming out the other side. And so you're like,
shit.
yeah.
did you go down and see if there were any
No, I
that
was
were
so tempted
killed?
to go, like, because you know that there was just elk in that
For
river,
sure.
you know, like, just piled in there
For
in
sure.
avalanche debris.
I think that happened in, was it Utah a couple years ago, or Colorado, where they, at the like end of the season, like springtime, people were hiking around, and they, at the bottom of an avalanche chute, they found like 20 deer that were just piled up, and like just carnage. It was crazy. So yeah, it happens for sure. I actually, when I worked for the Forest Service on the trail crew, we were up above Ketchum, up in the peaks, by Norton Peak, and we hiked up there, and came around the corner, and I was like, man, something kind of smells funky, and I found a dead mountain goat at the bottom of a slide.
Yeah.
And so it happens for sure. And if the animals can trigger it, obviously they potentially could be in later in the season and stuff when the avalanche danger is a little more prevalent. But if it's an early snow year, and especially, so let's talk about like the conditions that would create like a avalanche type of a thing. Would be like, it snows in October and everything else maybe down low melted again, but up high it's stuck, and it created a layer that then later when snow hits it kind of like,
well, let's
could
zoom
change
out.
things up. Yeah,
Let's zoom out even
Zoom way
more.
out.
Yeah.
Okay.
Zooming out. We're diving in. I love it. And I mean, in fact, like I didn't hunt the end of my elk tag 2 seasons ago because of avalanche danger. Like, it started, we just had really early snow.
Would have never, ever crossed my mind.
Yeah. I was like, because not only, I mean, the bummer, right, is you could go out, and we'll talk about how terrain plays into it. Terrain's kind of the key, but, you know, you could go out and stay out of avalanche terrain, but you have no control over where the animals are. And let's say you shoot something and it runs, it might run into, so it's like, even if you are like, I'm not going to shoot an animal that's in avalanche terrain, that animal could then, after you shoot it, move into avalanche terrain.
That's very true. I didn't think about that.
Yeah. Because I had that PIOB elk tag, and I hadn't filled it, and it just started dumping snow, and I was like, I can't go out there.
Yeah.
Or I can't go out there. I chose not to go out there. I was too scared.
Well, I mean, with that being your job, it's something that you think about. Whereas
it's on my brain.
Like Jordan said, she would have never thought about it.
No.
Yeah.
Well, let's zoom out. Let's do a little like avalanche basics here. An avalanche, like what is one, right? It's just a mass of snow sliding down a hill, right? Can be big, can be small. And there's all these different kinds of avalanches. There's dry ones, there's wet ones, right? We often have the sort of wet slide stuff more in the spring, around here at least, kind of as it starts to be cold at night, warm during the day. We've got sort of these often loose, wet avalanches out here. But in the winter, in kind of Intermountain West here, we have a lot of slab avalanches. And I think avalanches happen when you've got a snowpack structure that's weak. So you're like, what on earth does that mean? And basically, think about like putting a cinder block on top of a bunch of marbles is a way to think about a slab, right? You've got all this kind of weak snow, then you put consolidated snow on top of it.
So like a crust. So that's what you're talking about. Like it melts a little bit during the day, and then it freezes at night, and it makes like a hard ass crust.
That could be. It can be a crust. But even just, like what Leo was starting to refer to here, we have kind of this classic pattern where we'll, get snow around Halloween. And everyone will be all excited, except the people that know about avalanches. And everyone that knows about avalanches is like, no! And then it'll melt out on the south. It'll stick around, often in sort of upper elevation places where it stays colder, or norths. And then that snow just kind of rots. Like, I bet you can picture when snow first falls on the ground in your yard. It's like, often if it's fallen cold, it's like nice, fluffy.
Yeah.
And then it sits on the ground for a while, and it almost turns to like sugar. Can you picture that? Like you couldn't make a snowball with it.
Yeah.
When we're talking about weak snow, we're talking about like unconsolidated snow that's not acting as a slab.
Got it.
So let's say we've got that layer of sugar out there, and this is, spoiler alert, what we've got going on right now. That snow sat, rotted for about a month. Then it snowed again. And that snow is cohesive. Like if you were to go out there and we were to dig a hole in the snow, and then we were to put a shovel behind it and like kind of crank on it, you'd see it come off in these kind of blocks. That's what we're talking about when we talk about a slab. And right now, where we are, we actually have like weak layer, slab, weak layer, slab. We're building like a tiramisu almost of weak layers. And one of our forecasters says in Idaho we're either building our next weak layer or we're burying it.
Yeah.
Right? It's either like sitting out there with it not snowing, the top is sort of weakening, or we're putting new snow on top of it. So anyway, that's like sort of where we are here in Idaho. That's the kind of avalanche that kills far and away the most people. That's the kind of avalanche that we see and deal with the most. And we call it a persistent slab because it sticks around. It's a problem that we'll have. I mean, we're going to be dealing with these layers
The whole
for
season.
months.
Yeah.
Like hopefully they go away in the spring type thing. That was a lot of information about
That
avalanches.
No, it's
that was just
good.
like
Yeah.
how
That was really
how
good.
this what in the snow
And
actually creates them.
And I think for folks who haven't taken avalanche courses, like, let's say you're out there, you've got the elk tag I had, and you want to go out there, there's some snow on the ground. Your question is like, well, am I in avalanche danger or not? And there's a few ways you can sort of assess that. There's a couple things we talk about that are red flags. So the snowpack does not like change. Whenever something is changing, that should be this sort of red flag in your brain. Oh, like the snowpack could be becoming more dangerous, right? So getting sort of rapid precip, like a big dump of snow or rain. The snowpack doesn't like that. When we have precipitation events, like pretty much like clockwork, our avalanche danger rises. So if you're out, on a multi-day hunt, late season, and all of a sudden it's snowing a bunch or it's raining,
that's a sign.
Yeah,
to
that
be
could
like,
be
ooh.
that could be a red flag for you. Wind, and the reason wind is a big one is wind can actually deposit snow quicker than snow can deposit snow from snowing. Right?
Yeah. It's like taking it from one place and tossing it over the ridge or something.
Mm-hmm. And with hunters, right, we're often like working ridge lines. And oftentimes, I'm sure people out there can picture this, like one side of a ridge is just scoured. It's almost like down to the scree.
Right.
The other side filled in, right? And so you could have a wind slab sort of on that.
I could see working a ridge and you think that you're on dirt, but you're actually on a cornice, and then having that cornice fall through and you end up in an avalanche and you didn't like.
Yeah.
Like, I could see that happening as a hunter.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Walking on cornices. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And a cornice is just when sort of snow has just been so blown that it actually forms this, it looks almost like a wave kind of, if you were to look at a cross section of it. Snow just kind of going out over space.
Yeah, it'll kind of be like an overhang.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Not good.
So yeah, we've got the rapid precip is a red flag, wind, red flag. And so if you're seeing snow moving around, knowing like, oh, the snow is probably getting put somewhere. Another weather red flag is just rapid warm up. Say you're hunting spring bear, know, and you wake up and everything's like all lucked up, super icy. And by 2:00, you're down to your base layer. It's hot, definitely above freezing, and you're starting to see, snow come down, especially off of where there's exposed rock. You see like roller balls or just snow starting to move. Like that's a red flag.
Roller balls or red flag?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a sign like, hey, we might have some
it's moving
like
or something.
The snow's changing.
Snow's changing. It's getting warm. And here we have a lot of wet, loose avalanches in the spring. That just looks like almost like a little fan that comes from often rocks. And can get quite big. Sometimes they're small.
What about like you talk about September, October? Sometimes we get like a big snow in like September.
Yeah.
Would you be worried about that?
Totally
as
depends.
A hunter? Yeah. Like if it was just falling on the ground, not on previous snow.
Totally. And we actually, like, if you look in the forecasts from earlier this season, there were some places that we were sort of dealing precisely that. So there was actually some great verbiage in there. When I think like even, I'll talk about their verbiage and I'll talk like bigger picture too. If you see other avalanches out there, if you're walking around and you're seeing avalanches, huge red flag, right? Like, oh, okay, cool, avalanches are possible. So if it's October, and I remember one year on opening weekend of deer, Tori and I went out and camped. We woke up, ton of snow, like 6 inches of snow. Yeah, ton. Not actually a ton.
But that's probably the most like accurate way of describing what's going to happen to a hunter.
Yeah.
And so you're going to go from no snow to all of a sudden 6 inches of snow.
And that like 6 inches of snow on bare ground, it's like you're probably fine. Now if 6 inches falls and it's windy, there's going to be a lot more than 6 inches of snow in certain places, right?
Yeah.
And so having your brain turned on with that. If you're walking around on snow, right? Basically, for that early season, we'd be sort of worried about, like, okay, do we have, as long as it stays cold, like, are we worried about slabs? Like, that's the thing we're worried about. And so a way that you could kind of assess that, if you're just walking through and with every step, you're just stepping all the way to the ground, no problem, the snow's really unconsolidated, like, you probably aren't that worried about slabs.
Yeah.
If some of it you're staying up on top and then you're kind of punching through to the bottom, you can picture then that what that snow is doing is like, well, it's holding you up near the top. It's more consolidated near the top. And then near the bottom, it might be a little weaker because all of a sudden you're kind of punching, right? You take a couple steps, boom, punch through to the bottom. Or you've got your trekking pole, right? And you're sort of like walking, it's like up, boom, up, boom, you know, that should be starting to think your brain like, oh, there's some sort of change in the snow. Like not all the snow is acting the same here. I seem to be like staying up and then coming down. And then what would be the like, ooh, yeah, you're probably dealing with a slab is it takes some effort to like take your trekking pole, push it through, and then all of a sudden it's like you're push, and then boom, it's like elevator shafts to the bottom, right? That.
So you're doing with sugar underneath that crust.
And you could kind of dig down and probably see that. And again, the snow and what it's going to be like on the ground is it's so not uniform, right? And as hunters, I think hunters can really appreciate just subtle changes in aspect, have such immense differences on, you know, what is going on the ground. And so it's same with snow, you know, both from like a sun perspective, because sun will make crusts, and crusts can play into kind of the snowpack structure in a big way. And also just like the amount of it, also the wind, right? If we pretty classically have winds that come from somewhere around like the western half of the compass. So then pretty classically, we've got snow kind of being deposited on our eastern slopes.
Speaking of slopes and stuff, what is there a like north facing, south facing, west facing? Like what is the most common to have slides?
I think with slabs, persistent slab avalanches, we often have this problem more pronounced on our norths, like things that face more north, just because the way that it's kind of like the recipe, right, that we often cook up here in Idaho is that we put snow on the ground in the fall, we let it sit, it totally melts off on the souths. Some of it like sticks around in the norths, and that becomes our first weak layer of the season.
Gotcha.
And so, yeah, that's pretty classic for us. But then when you flip, again, thinking about spring or that scenario, we have a huge snow in October, and then it warms way back up. You could be dealing with wet snow issues, and then you'd probably be more worried about the southern half of the compass, right? So
it's just like you just have to like kind of have your wits about you and just kind of judge the face, just as it is.
And I think if you're, you know, as much as I like to think that I'm explaining everything to everyone right now, I know I'm not, you know? And so if you're getting a tag that you know is going to be in the snow, it's worth taking a level 1 avalanche course as part of the prep for that hunt. You know, maybe you're going somewhere you don't usually hunt and you know it's going to be in the snow.
Going buddies too.
For sure. I think that's
Going
probably
pairs.
a huge thing is not to hunt by yourself if you're going to be, you know, up in mountain goat country, steep, shelly nastiness is just like have a buddy, because that's the only way you're going to get dug out if something were to happen.
And I think when we would talk, and I should say there's one more red flag I didn't mention, which is if you're out there and maybe, you know, you're walking or maybe you're snowshoeing or maybe you're using a snowmobile to access hunting, if you're seeing sort of cracks coming out from your sled, from your snowshoes, that's a sign that the snowpack is unstable. And sometimes you'll actually feel the snow just drop, and you might hear it go like woof. And that's a red flag. If you're on snow that is collapsing, that's like the snowpack trying to tell you like, hey, this is unstable.
Gotcha. But that's probably a scary noise.
Yeah. Angles for slides. You guys were talking 30 degrees is kind of the starting point.
And you could picture, right? Like you could have the weakest snowpack in the world, like so much sugar junk with like a huge slab on top of it, super consolidated. And if we're standing in the middle of a football field in the middle of Nebraska, it's flat, we could collapse that snowpack. And we might drop a few inches and feel it. But we're not going to be in an avalanche because we don't have the angle, right? In order for snow to slide downhill, it actually needs some pitch. And we use 30 degrees as the sort of demarcation between avalanche terrain, not avalanche terrain. And you could be in an avalanche on a slope that's less than 30 degrees in a few ways. One is if you were standing below a steeper slope, and we actually have had a fatality near Smiley Creek in Frenchman's Drainage back 10 years ago, actually, almost 10 years ago exactly, where some people were snowmobiling in the flats on the bottom, and one of the sleds got stuck, I think. They were walking around trying to get it out, and a slide came down. They triggered a slide like way, way up above them, came down and buried all 4 of them. And 2 were able to dig themselves out. They were able to get help, get the other 2 out. One of them didn't make it. One of them actually survived for 105 minutes under the snow.
I remember this.
Yeah,
because
which is
knew
wild.
What's the normal?
kid.
Under the
15 minutes is a big dividing line. After 15 minutes, your odds
go down.
go way, way down.
Yeah. So 100 and some odd minutes. I remember I played softball with the kid that was his mom.
Huh.
That was the one that survived that. But I think his dad might have been the one that passed away.
Yeah.
It was a bad deal.
Bad deal.
But I remember them saying like they were just walking around.
Yeah.
Like they and it came down from above. And
so just being really aware of what's above you, I think, is important.
and that's honestly that I could
That's
see
one of
that
the big-
happening more than anything. Hunting is like you might not be up in the cliffs and doing anything crazy, but you're down below kind of at the first bench type of a thing, and all of a sudden an animal walks across above you, or who knows, for whatever reason, it's just the time that it just decides to slide, and you're going to find yourself in a bad.
Or you trigger it from down below. I mean, right now, if you were to look at the avalanche forecast today, we'll talk about what that is too, you'd see that they're telling you like remote triggering, right? Remote control you use to like turn on your TV without having to walk to the TV and turn it on. So remote triggering is like you triggering an avalanche that starts in a place where you're not actually standing.
So there's enough like vibration of you or whatever you're doing with the snowpack walking across the bottom of a scree slide or something. If you're trying to traverse the bottom of that, you could actually start the avalanche
impact
from
the
above.
weak layer, and it just I think of it, this is such a elementary way, but like almost like a little thing of dominoes, you know?
Yeah.
Like you standing down here, you collapse the weak layer, and it just rips up and collapses the weak layer. Could be thousands of feet above you. You know? We just last week in the forecast area, we had a slide triggered from over a half mile away.
Really?
Half mile.
Wow.
Holy shit.
I would have never thought that was possible.
So in terms of talking about the avalanche forecast, you know, if you've got a late enough hunt, and depending on where you're hunting, you might be able to use an avalanche forecast to tell you about avalanche danger. And if you're in the U.S., you can go to avalanche.org. And that'll pull up a map of all the forecasts in the U.S. And not every plot of land in the U.S. is under an avalanche forecast. And so, but if you're in one, you can like go to that spot, click it, and you can read all about what is going on. That would be a huge thing to do. And the start dates for those forecasts aren't set in stone. A lot of forecast centers will start issuing forecasts when there starts being avalanche danger. But if you'd been hunting, you know, somewhere in the Sawtooths or, you know, in the Smokies or something
like that,
and you had a tag that went kind of late, you probably could have gone on and gotten an avalanche forecast for at least part of your hunt, you know, the later part of your hunt from an avalanche center.
That's cool. Yeah. That's good to know. And then you were saying, so yeah, it's avalanche.org, and then Sawtooth Avi has their own app.
Oh yeah. So the Sawtooth Avalanche Center, which just is the, you know, the avalanche center that is in South Central Idaho, and covers, you know, Sawtooth, Smokies, Boulders, Pios, sort of Soldiers, sort of that chunk of Idaho. There's now an app called Avi, AVY, that you can get the forecast on, and the Northwest Avalanche Center, if you're hunting up there, is also doing that app, and I bet at some point kind of all the avalanche centers will be on it. That's new this year, so
that's gonna be cool, especially if everyone will kind of combine forces and everyone can hop on there, so that way it's an easy app for people to just have on their phone and pull it up.
So So, yeah.
I looked yesterday at basically everything that they have, like Colorado. They had a little bit of stuff in Wyoming, and then here, and it's all orange. I mean, the whole, everything is, which is, it starts with a B.
It starts with a C.
Considerable.
There you go. Yeah, Jordan.
I forgot.
Nice.
There's a B
No, that
in
was
there.
awesome.
There's a B in there.
I said a P.
Oh, a P? Oh, yeah, no, you're way
I
off.
don't know. A prospect? I don't know. Anyways, yeah, considerable.
Scary.
So that's 3 out of, what, 5
Yeah.
on the scale?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So that is, you would consider that scary.
Oh,
That's,
yeah. And that's where the most avalanche fatalities occur. If you were to look at, the avalanche fatalities that we have data on, and you were to map, well, what was the danger rating on that day, the biggest chunk of the pie falls on considerable hazard days.
And that's right in the middle of like extreme to low.
Kind of, it's in the middle in that because it goes low, moderate, considerable, high, extreme. So it's in the middle in that way, but the scale is logarithmic. I'm sorry, it's exponential, which means it's getting so much bigger. So like the jump from
got it.
low to considerable in sort of how much it gets more dangerous is not the same jump as considerable to extreme.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, but it's like pretty big jumps.
Huge jumps. And each time you step up the scale, the jump gets way bigger.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not good.
So considerable, the reason that probably the most people die in avalanches or trigger avalanches during that time is because it's like that middle ground where it's like, well, it's not high.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to push it. I'm going
Yeah.
to go or whatever. And or if you're where we live, Idaho's probably inconsiderable 90% of the year.
Yeah, maybe not 90, but like a good chunk,
Yeah.
Like we sit at moderate and considerable for a lot.
So then if you're used to being around here, you're going to look at that and you're like, well, we're always that way. And so I'm always going to sit at home.
Complacency.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Get used to it.
For sure. Yeah, it's pretty easy on an extreme day,
To not go.
Yeah. So, yeah.
So equipment wise, what do you think is like, if you're doing a late season goat hunt, you're going to be in nasty and it's going to be snow and whatever, you should probably take kind of everything.
Yeah.
I would say. But like, is there stuff that hunters like earlier season, like what's not acceptable to bring, but I'm not going to pack all that stuff on a 10-day backpack hunt all the time.
I would imagine, and interrupt me if I'm wrong,
Go for it, Leah.
that like if you're in an early season and it's like first snow, second snow or whatever, that you just have to have your wits about you and just not go in the like shell like slide that's now has a cornice on the top of it and stuff like that. It's just like being smart in those situations and sticking to the bare ground. But then if it's like late season, I think that's when you start packing things up.
Yeah, and the gear that'll help you. And again, when we think about avalanches and how to not become an avalanche fatality, it's way more about trying to not be in one than trying to dig your friend out of one.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you're right in saying, understanding a bit about terrain and being able to use that to your advantage. That's the key to not getting in one. The gear that's going to help you if someone's in one is wearing an avalanche transceiver that's on.
Mm-hmm.
And that, those aren't that heavy. You just wear it on your body. And then having a probe and an avalanche shovel. The probe, like I've got a carbon probe. I don't actually know what the weight on it is, but it's light. And then
How long are the probes?
good question. So, we recommend for recreational ones to be, it's either 240 or 260 centimeters, like greater than that. I can't remember which one it is. And then for professionals to have over 300 centimeters, so a 3-meter probe.
Okay.
But what tool are you carrying?
Trekking poles is kind of what I was thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Like, could you get away with bringing trekking poles? I think my trekking poles go out to 130 centimeters.
Yeah.
Maybe a little longer than that.
Yeah.
So it's not quite as long as what you're talking about, but
yeah,
it's better than nothing.
Yeah. I think if you're, like you said, Leah, I think if you're going into a snow hunt, and you know you're going to be near avalanche terrain, could be really helpful to have that stuff on board. And I think just everyone knowing a little bit more about it and knowing like, oh, today's like not the day to kind of enter that terrain can be huge. If you're like, yeah, I can't add a shovel to my backpack right now, you know, like, but, and in terms of like, how do you know what that terrain looks like and what that terrain is? There's a bunch of apps out there with digital mapping. OnX being one of them.
I was
a
just
lot of
gonna
hunters
talk about
already are using, where you can put a slope angle shading overlay on there. You know, so you've got your hunt area, and you can actually, it'll kind of color code for you slope angles, so you can look at it that way. You can also have apps on your phone that will measure slope angle as well. So
Yeah, what was that one that you had on the
theodolite.
Yeah.
But there's more and more coming out. Like someone just the other day told me about an app that I had never even heard of. So,
Well, most of our rangefinders will give you that too.
A slope
If
angle.
you range, it'll give you your
Yeah.
slope angle because it'll give you a cut off of your distance. It'll give you a distance cut.
So say you could
Hey, the
you could
rangefinder you,
be-
gave me doesn't have that on
Well, I
there.
get-
But make me your old rangefinder.
Yeah.
Probably doesn't.
that thing's like a decade old. I
Yeah.
think the technology wasn't quite there, but man, anymore Jordan's got some fancy 6-hour rangefinders, and it'll tell you slope angle, all sorts of different
Yeah,
things. And
that's
so
cool.
you can you if you're like standing at the bottom and you were to like hit the top of the peak, would it tell you what the angle
it
is?
would give you. It would give you the angle, which like that is from where you are to the top.
Yeah.
So if you can imagine
That's
a
the
hill,
average.
unless you're not at the bottom, it's gonna be steeper than that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Probably.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but that's that's really smart because
something you
that's
always have
something you
with you.
always have with you.
Yeah.
And so, yeah. That's good. Good to know.
And phones, you know, like I think phones are becoming this tool we're using a lot more in the backcountry, and we never want to be fully reliant on them, right? Because they break,
No.
they die, but that can be a useful tool for you in terms of navigating terrain and just being aware of where you are in terms of slope angles, for sure.
So I had a prototype of the Unk Foundry jacket a couple years ago, and they had those strips.
Oh, the Reco.
Yeah, what is that?
Mm-hmm. Great question. So Reco is, and it's pretty cool, and I am very much not the expert on Reco, but it's built into a lot of clothing, and it's like a less techie avalanche transceiver. You don't have to like turn it on and off. It's just like in your jacket or your snow pants or whatever. And so in a slide, people can actually get like Reco technology out and find folks. And probably the application for that most is like on a ski resort.
Yeah.
Because again, time is like so of the essence here, and you're not like carrying around like when I'm out ski touring, I'm not carrying around like a Reco device.
It's like a pretty big device.
It's not huge, but
You're not
it's like
gonna
same
carry it
thing. I'm not
around.
like, you know, because I have my avalanche transceiver.
Yeah.
That's like the gear that we're all
Right.
carrying for that. But
A ski resort
yeah.
would have that. Okay.
yeah, they're like training with it, so that if there was an inbound slide, that's one of the tools they could
Or
deploy.
search and rescue would probably have that if they came to try and like find you, help you in a
That's something too. Last night I was thinking about it. I was like, well, these things can even happen inbounds at ski resorts. I was thinking that they could only happen out of bounds, and I was like, you probably won't find me out of bounds unless I'm uncontrollably going out of bounds, which isn't totally out of the.
It's not out of the realm of
Not out of the question. Just kidding. I'm very under control on my board.
But
I go
you're
fucking slow.
it's hard to fly off of the run if you can't fly in general. It's hard.
Yeah.
5
I thought I
miles
was
an
going
hour.
pretty fast.
She thought she was really going fast one time. Gets to the bottom and
I
was
was
like,
like, I'm doing
"Oh
so
man,
good.
I was so scared. I was going so fast." And I was like, "I videoed you. Do you want to see it?" I showed her the video, and she goes, "No way. That was this run." And I was like, "No, it is." And I'm like back there, like pizza-ing.
That's amazing.
It's scary.
Yeah, it's been
I wanna
entertaining.
break my face.
Yeah.
It is scary. Yeah. But
Well,
yeah,
that's
I mean,
cool that like
yeah.
I don't know if First Light still puts those in.
I don't know I don't know
Yeah.
if that
But it'd
ended
be
up being a thing.
Yeah, I think that obviously they're based in Ketchum, and so there's a lot of people that are using their gear to
Right.
ski and stuff, and so maybe they added those in, but I don't know if the latest iterations of those things have those in, because I do know that a couple of them did have them. Yeah, it'd be interesting to kind of check that out, or if any of the other companies does have that
Yeah.
installed.
Yeah, I
if you
don't
will.
know.
But, in general, from like a hunt application, and again, we talked about people can live under the snow in these kind of like not one off, but really rare instances for a long time. But in general, like people need to come out of the snow quick.
Yeah.
And
For people that have like, if you think avalanche is this like fluffy snow that comes
Yeah, no.
down and like you're just gonna be like woo, like going like this, like it just imagine, gosh, what, I can't even think, it's just like it piles down, and like when it stops it just like crunches and creates like such a hard pack layer that like when you're shoveling, it is like shoveling dirt out of your garden. Like it's heavy, it's compacted.
Yeah.
And so imagine if you're that person that's smashed down in that it's like smashing, compacting around you. So it's not like you can move your arms and like create space to breathe and stuff like that. It's like sometimes you're going to be in an awkward angle. You might be upside down. All sorts of
people talk about not being able to move a pinky sometimes,
Yeah.
when they're in there. And so I guess we should talk about, like, if you're in a slide, you're out there hunting, you're in a slide, well, what should you do? Yell avalanche, right? Because maybe you're hunting with folks. That clues them into this is happening and they can get eyes on you.
Mm-hmm.
Because remind me after this, I want to talk about where would you start looking. Yell avalanche. And, when we're talking about being on sled or skis, we're talking about trying to, get off, like sled or ski off of it. It's like not really what you're going to do.
If you're on foot.
If by chance you're going past a tree and you can grab it and hang on, go for it. But in general, trees are not our friend when we're kind of getting flushed down through them.
Mm-hmm.
Ideally, in a perfect world, you're getting rid of equipment, right? If you've got your gun with you, like chucking that away from you. If you got trekking poles, chucking those away. We just don't want that stuff tumbling with us, and also kind of weighing us down, being anchors. Yeah, poking us too. And then we're trying to sort of swim. Like, I don't know, maybe folks out there have been whitewater rafting before, and sort of being in this position where you're kind of on your back, your feet are downhill. That would be in a perfect world. That's probably not what's going to be happening. You're just trying to, if you can keep your head near the surface, if you know where the surface is, you're swimming towards that. As it's starting to slow, you're reaching with one hand across your body, grabbing your backpack strap, and sort of trying to make a pocket for your airway in sort of the crook of your elbow, and sticking your other hand to wherever you think up is. You might not even know which way's up. Because you can imagine, you might poke your hand through the snow, and then your buddy's like, I see their hand.
Yeah, I would have never thought about that position.
And if you're the buddy, right, important to watch, yell avalanche if there's an avalanche. You might be the one alerting your friend. They might not even realize it. Yell avalanche, and then watch. Because where you last see them is going to be really important. You don't have to search for them above that. And in general, right, snow is a fluid. And so as it flows downhill, you can picture it's going to flow downhill somewhat like if you were to pour a Nalgene bottle out, how would that flow? I guess it would like seep into the ground. But you can picture if it didn't, how would it flow down? So, if you don't have a transceiver on, they're most likely going to be in the fall line with where you last saw them, right? They're not likely going to make a huge lateral move right or left. Looking for clues in the snow, right? If you see something poking out of the snow, go pull on it. Like maybe the glove is attached to a hand. So that can be, yeah.
And then the arm going across the face is just to try and help create a pocket of airspace to give you more breathable air.
Yeah. About 3/4 of people that are killed in slides die from asphyxiation, which is like basically you sort of create this like ice mask around you, and you're just breathing in your own exhalation.
Mm-hmm.
You don't run out of oxygen. There's tons of oxygen in the snow, right? You can picture if you pick up snow, it's like tons of airspace in there.
Yeah.
That's all
So
oxygen.
it's just
you know?
CO2 poisoning.
It's literally, yeah, that's what it is. And
Huh.
so if you're, yeah, and also if you're buried, trying to really slow down your breathing and not panic, which I'm sure would be so difficult, but you're just buying yourself more time if you slow down your breathing. If you're breathing really fast, you're just creating this ice lens around you that's basically going to trap all that air.
Huh.
You know? So,
Anxiety.
yeah.
Yeah, snow is not your friend. I'm selling all my snowboarding stuff.
That was the opposite goal of the podcast. Leah's upset. But yeah.
I mean, it's scary. It's scary to think about. But just like you said, have like knowing those things. It's just the littlest things like that. I had never heard of that position with the arm over and the hand up. But it definitely makes sense. The one of the avalanches that I was involved in when we were digging him out, his hand was the first thing that we found. And it was one of those things that you could be like, oh gosh, like it's the road map, obviously, is like his hand and then go down to his body type of a thing. And it's also like reassuring that you can kind of like grab someone's hand, like, we got you, like, you know, hold steady, you know, like don't give up type of a thing. And like, cause it, you know, it was like a 8-foot hole by the time we got down to him type of a thing. And so it's a long ways and it takes a while. But that was like the first thing that we got to was his hand. And if his hand wasn't up, then we might have dug over here for a little bit longer, you know, or dug over there for a little bit longer. But his hand kind of was the first thing that came up. And so then you were able to like go down from there.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah.
Bad deals.
Bad deals.
Yeah. You want to be very alert.
Yeah. I hope no one that's listening to this is ever in an avalanche. That's my hope. That's our goal with doing the podcast.
Yeah.
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 It's like getting people alerted to the fact that this is this kind of sneaky hazard in hunting that we're not really talking about that much. And we're hoping to, with friends at Sawtooth Avalanche Center and Sawtooth Avalanche Center, we're hoping to do a bigger project to get some more research on hunters and avalanches and try to come up with some more guidelines that we can put out there for folks, because it is different. You know, you're traveling a different way. You're not carrying the same gear. You know, I think in some situations it makes sense to carry that gear, and it doesn't in all situations when you're hunting, for sure. So, like, what tools can we give folks to not get caught in these things?
Yeah, and we talk about this all the time, but this is just this is one aspect, snow. There's like a cajillion other things that could happen. So like, let people know where you are. Tell somebody where you're going to be or where you're planning to be, especially if you're going by yourself. And don't be a cheap ass. Buy an inReach.
Yeah. I was just going to say, like, this is another one of those things that, like, having a satellite communicator is so important. So you can hit that SOS button if one of your buddies is in it. Because even if you dig them out or they pop up top or whatever, the likelihood that they have an injury is high, like very high. Like you're probably going to have a broken bone of sorts. You know, you're going to think about an avalanche, like you're going down and there's trees in there, there's rocks in there, there's all these things. And so like, yeah, you might be able to find your buddy or he's on top of the avalanche, but he broke his leg in the avalanche. And so then it's like, well, I'm still screwed because we're 8 miles back in and we need to figure out how to get out of here. And so that's when the inReach comes into play and like being able to communicate to the outside world to.
Yeah. And you can download Onyx and not pay for it for some people. So if you need to drop your wife a pin, like drop her a pin and write names down and stuff. Don't just like tell her where you're going. Cause like, you know, Rock Creek might turn into a different kind of, you know,
or there's 20 fingers off of the same drainage type of thing. Like it's just so, that's just like surface level to say what drainage you're going to be in.
Yeah.
Compared to like actually being like, I am right here type of thing. When I was involved in that avalanche, this was before, I mean, we had a satellite phone that like barely worked. This was 2009, 2008 when that was. And so it was way before kind of like the Garmin inReaches and stuff where like everyone carried them. It was more of a like
It's wild that
1
you all
in
had a
10
satellite
people.
phone.
Yeah.
That was like cutting edge, I bet, for someone to be
It was
sledding around
the
with
like
that.
first time my buddy had it, and he was like, "Look at this!" Like it was like, "This is crazy expensive, but I think it's going to come in handy," and it didn't really work that well.
Yeah.
Like we went up to once we had him all dug out and everything, we everyone like took off their outer layers and put him underneath him. He had a broken back. Put him underneath him, and then my dad stayed with him, and I went with another guy, and we couldn't get any signal with the satellite phone where we were, so we tried to go up onto a saddle, and like could kind of get a hold of emergency services, but like it kept dropping the call. And then we literally had to like ride out really fast, got in the truck, and then drove basically back to town before we got service, and was able to call and actually talk to somebody. And that added potentially an hour to 2 to search and rescue efforts, compared to if you had a Garmin InReach nowadays, you'd be able to just hit that SOS button and or just like really just text straight to them. Or if you had a satellite phone, now everything just works so much better. Like we're so much better off with the technology that we have now. But I remember the search and rescue guys got to the parking lot and I had a paper map, and I was trying to point out what ridge he was on, what slope, blah blah blah. And you know, if you're bouncing around snowmobiling all day and you're like, well, we started here, we went over there, and we came out here, I'm like 90% sure he's right there. I'm 90% sure he's right there. And that you just don't have to worry about that. If a one message on an InReach is going to here's your lat and longitude. Like it's going to tell you exactly where they are. And so it's just like the small things that make it faster.
Yeah.
For people to come and get you.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely being prepared for things to go south. So key.
Mm-hmm.
And new iPhones are being built in with some satellite technology.
Yeah.
And have an SOS feature, which I admittedly don't know a lot about. But if you're like, I like getting an InReach is like not part of my budget. I think doing a little research if you've got a newer iPhone.
Yeah, I think they have the SOS feature.
You like point something about you when you activate it. You like point towards them, or you point towards where you think town is, or something.
Really?
Like that.
We should
there
look
was
into
some
that.
kind of a pointing.
I need
thing
to do some
on.
research on it.
I'm sure
Because
once
everyone's
you
going to
hit
have
it,
a phone with them.
I'm sure when you hit it, it tells you how to work it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think there's a test feature too. Like I know someone that like tested it at one point, but I haven't dug into it, just mostly because I just carry my InReach. So I haven't.
But man, forget to charge your InReach and having your phone on
Our
you.
buddy Avery.
Yeah, I was literally just going to say that. We had a buddy who was climbing a mountain, trying to summit the peak, and it was a nice warm day when she went up, and when she tried to come back down, it had gotten into the shade and everything was frozen, and it ended up being a bad deal. She had her phone and her spot satellite indicator, she hadn't charged it overnight or something, and it ended up dying. And so she wasn't sure if the signal had went out or not. She had her cell phone, so if you had the SOS feature, even though she didn't have service, you could use that SOS feature on the cell phone, and it potentially would have. Yes, I mean, she still ended up getting airlifted out of there. Unfortunately, she ended up taking a bad fall off of a giant cliff trying to get down.
Yeah. You can, if you want to, you can get that full story is on Meet Your Campfires.
Yeah,
I think it's part 1.
I think it was. Yeah,
I'm pretty sure it's on the first
go on
one.
and tell that story?
Yeah, she did.
No
yeah, all of a sudden,
and there's a bunch of other stories on there that would
Avery,
make you just.
Yeah. We were listening to that, and I was like, man, we should get Avery to go on this. And literally, it was like the next story is of this girl, and I was like, oh, this is definitely Avery. She said that it was kind of a funny like interaction, because she was like, you're in this room, and they want you to be very serious and tell this very like serious story and stuff, but then like everyone's kind of like happy, and like the dogs were there and playing, and people were like playing with the puppies and stuff. She was like, it's kind of funky to like, be like serious and tell the story and stuff that way. But
serious story.
That was definitely a story of like telling, like, even though she had a plan of when she was going to come back and had told friends what time she would be back and blah blah blah, that she ended up having to go down a separate face than the way that she had planned to go up, and that so she wouldn't have been where she fell was not where she had said she was going to be. And then like it got cold really fast, and she had been injured, and she was actually rescued an hour before the time that she had told her buddies, our friend, what time she would be home. And so if they had waited until that hour, and then started to think about coming and rescuing her. And on all of those things, she probably would have ended up staying the night and potentially froze to death overnight. She was already in shock and hypothermic by the time she was rescued, and it was an hour before she was even supposed to be home, type of a thing.
Yeah.
And so it's just like shit happens. And so that's when it's important to have all these safety features.
Yeah, for sure.
To have with you.
Where can people see one of the classes that we saw?
Oh, great question. Well, if you're in Idaho, and if you go to sawtoothavalanche.com, you can find the Idaho Avalanche Education Calendar. And that has kind of all the classes in the state of Idaho on it, ranging from, a level 2 to a awareness talk type thing. But wherever you are, if you were to sort of Google Avalanche Awareness Talk, if you were to look on avalanche.org, find your closest forecast zone, reach out to them. They'd probably have information on it. But yeah, going out and getting more information. And
do you know if there's any YouTube videos that would do a step-by-step kind of like introduction to Avalanche?
Yeah. I mean, on our YouTube, on the Sawtooth Avalanche Center's YouTube, you can find an introduction to Avalanche's presentation.
That would be good too. Just thinking like people could do that from home.
Yeah, totally.
And like it's sometimes it's hard to make the time to go and do an actual course or a 3-day course or anything like that. So if you could have like a things that you need to know introductory course on YouTube.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you can find that on our YouTube.
Sweet.
Cool. Thanks, Annie.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This was super fun.
Mm-hmm.
It was great.